Phantom draft time, my first ever attempt at a phantom draft. So I am super excited for this video, but I'm also very nervous because this was an absurdly difficult task. It probably speaks to, I guess, the overall depth of this year's draft, just how many players you have to try to fit into these, I'm doing a top 30 here, so the top 30 places. And it probably shows you that teams that have multiple picks inside the top 20, top 30 are probably better placed than teams who just have one pick, say, inside the top 5. So that also kind of calls into question the idea that teams could try to trade picks. They could try to get up the draft board, maybe trade a top 5 pick for maybe several in the top 20 or 30 or 40. So anyway, let's get into it. I don't want to talk for too long in this build-up because there's a lot of stuff to get through. So let's kick things off with the number 1 pick overall, and I think that is going to be Josh Smiley to the Kangaroos, who hold the overall number 1 pick. Now, I don't think Josh Smiley is an absolute foregone conclusion as a number 1 pick. I don't think the difference between him and the next best player is like last year with Harley Reid, but I think Smiley really gives North Melbourne exactly what they want. They either need a second tall forward or they need more depth in the midfield, more bigger bodies and authority figures, I guess, at that stoppage source. The potential of Luke Davies-Uniacke leaving, I guess, is real. I think since Bryn Teakle has come into the side, he's kind of occupying that second tall forward role to Larkey at the moment, and that's really freed up players like Cam Zurhaar to kind of do what they want. So I think that gives North the flexibility to be able to pick up Josh Smiley here as a pure midfielder. Recently, they've sort of drafted midfielders like Colby McKercher, like Harry Sheasel, a little bit more, I guess, cerebral type midfielders, more smarts and ball use and that sort of thing. So I think Smiley comes in, he gives them that power, he gives them that versatility, but he also just gives them that brute force at stoppage. They are one of the worst teams at getting inside 50s, generating those inside 50s. So Smiley's going to, win your clearance out of the centre and just give your forwards a little bit more of a look at the ball. And he's going to be able to release those players like Sheasel and McKercher to give us some actual decent inside 50s as well. He averages 27 disposals in the Coates League and almost 2 goals a game. So he's been prolific at Coates Talent League level. A few people have sort of questioned whether he's going to cross over very well to the AFL level. He's obviously kind of beating up on younger players at the moment at under 18 level. I think there's a few things that he won't be able to do. I've seen him do things like, take the ball out of a ruck contest inside forward 50 and kick a goal. He's obviously not going to be able to do that at AFL level, but just the sheer size of him, 194 centimetres. Obviously don't have the weights anymore, but he's a bigger guy, he's a strong guy, so it's going to cross over pretty well to AFL level. Hopefully he can sort of build on that power and explosiveness out of the contest. We haven't seen that so much, but his body position and his stoppage craft is quite good, so he can get his body in the right areas and set up for other players. So I think this one just makes sense, particularly with North Melbourne's situation. We go to pick number 2, and it's Richmond who hold this pick, and they're going to go for one of 2 midfielders, either Jagger Smith or Finn O'Sullivan. I think it's going to be Jagger Smith. They've had links to him in the preseason. He did some training with them. He's been really the standout midfielder in the Coates League this season, 34.7 disposals. He's averaged just huge numbers. He's always got 10 plus clearances as well to go along with that. Probably haven't seen a junior player that is just that good at reacting to the ground ball around clearance. He reads the eyes of the ruckman so well, and he's just so good in that phase of the game. There are a few question marks over his damage factor. Doesn't get a lot of score involvements and certainly doesn't kick a lot of goals, but I just think the main weapon that he has is that clearance area. He's a smaller body, so he's probably just learnt and taught himself to be able to compete by reacting better as opposed to outpowering people like some other players do. So yeah, he's super in that phase of the game, and I think the scoring will come when he just learns to be a little bit more direct. He's just a bit too caught up with ball retention at the moment. Richmond obviously need a player like Jagger Smith, a clearance specialist. They've been the worst team in that area at the moment. So I think a player like Taranto, who's quite strong around the contest, a bigger body, will go really well with a player like Jagger Smith. And this one just sort of makes sense with the links as well. We go to pick 3, and I think this is where West Coast will bid on Levi Ashcroft and force Brisbane to move up the board here. So Brisbane will end up with the father-son pick of Levi Ashcroft, which is a bit of a no-brainer. He's an unbelievable midfielder. Hasn't played a lot in the Coates League this season because he's been playing school footy, but in the academy games and the national championships games, he's just racks up 25 plus disposals every week. He's always the highest midfielder for score involvements. He kicks goals as well. His stoppage craft is really outstanding as well. So I don't think Brisbane need this player, but I think you've just got to take a player like Ashcroft when he is available to you. Pick 4 falls with West Coast, and a lot of Phantom drafts that I've seen have gone with Luke Traynor to West Coast, which I think does make some sense. They do need to replenish their defensive stocks for sure, but I think what they're going to do here is take a midfielder. I think this draft just kind of forces their hand to take a midfielder. You've got a player like Finn O'Sullivan who's sitting there. I think the West Coast's midfield build that they're doing at the moment just really needs a bit more of a polished player, a little bit of a player with outside qualities as well, and Finn O'Sullivan really fits that mould. You look at the names of Reid, Yeo, Hewitt, Jinby, Cully. They're all big bodies. They're strong in the contest. They're contested possession-winning players. Finn O'Sullivan has that in his game, but he also has that outside polish as well. I think West Coast have struggled to move the ball a little bit this season. All of their scoring's been done. They've got a high percentage of clearance scoring, and it kind of happens in small patches, and then they aren't able to get scores from the back half and that sort of thing. I think Finn O'Sullivan's arguably the best player in this draft. That's how good he is. He hasn't been able to show himself with the injuries that he's had. Only played the one game for Oakley, played one of the academy games. He also hasn't played any national championships. So he probably slips down to pick 4 here just due to the fact that he hasn't played. And West Coast, or whoever does end up drafting Finn O'Sullivan, could be getting an absolute weapon here. Adelaide have pick 5, and given this draft is midfield heavy, I think that also forces Adelaide into a midfield selection, which still really suits them. I think their bookends are quite good. A lot's been said about their forward line not really firing and someone to replace Taylor Walker, but I think they've got Riley Thilthorpe there. He's still got time to develop. And it's really the midfield that just needs that class and a high-end talent that you would get with pick 5. I think the obvious one here for Adelaide is to go for the local talent in Sid Draper. He ticks the boxes of being able to accumulate the footy. He's good at clearance, but he's also good on the outside as well. He has that explosion from contest that the modern midfielders need. He sort of has that footy-specific build, I would almost say. He's kind of got the shorter legs with a bigger torso, that sort of power through the core that he gets, and his ball use is really good. A few examples in the national championships where he was able to take the ball straight from the ruckman, burst out a stoppage, and then hit a target inside forward 50. He will hurt you with his disposal, but he's also got that pace and endurance, that really good combination to be a 250 game midfielder. So I think an easy one for Adelaide there if they're faced with the decision here. If one of Finn O'Sullivan or Jagger Smith slips, that might make it a little bit more difficult. Pick 6 is with St Kilda, and I think they might bid here on Leo Lombard and to make Gold Coast come up the board. Leo Lombard to Gold Coast obviously makes sense. They'll obviously match the bid. He is a little dynamo. Strong in the hips, strong in the contest, another one that can burst out a stoppage. He's a tackle breaker. And you look at that Gold Coast midfield with Anderson, Rowell, Tuke Miller, they can just plonk Leo Lombard in the forward half of the ground, get him to win those contests inside forward 50 and hit the scoreboard, which he's quite capable of doing. We've seen it in the national championships, his ability to break tackles, explode out of stoppage. If he can do that in the forward half of the ground, he really gives them that X factor that they don't have. They've got some good tools down there, King and Lukosius and those sorts of players, but to have a sort of a more stocky, sort of dynamic player down there at ground level will be awesome for Gold Coast, and this one just makes sense. I think in the long term, he'll be able to go into the midfield and he accumulates the footy and really does everything, has the tank to be able to run out games in the midfield as well. So that will be the future for Leo Lombard. St Kilda then, having missed that kind of crop of really highly talented midfielders, I think their hand might be forced here to go for a key position player. They don't really want a key position defender here, but I think Luke Traynor kind of forces your hand a little bit. So they've drafted Van Ness and Keeler in the 2022 draft, who are both key defenders. So they've sort of gone down that path. They've obviously got, players like Battle, players like Wilkie already on their list. Battle's a chance of leaving, so I guess Traynor could be a perfect replacement for him in the back half of the ground. But Trainer's not really just a key defender. He's a player that potentially has midfield qualities as well. He's averaging 21 disposals in the Coates League, 5 rebound 50s and 6 marks. So he's good in the air. He can lock down on players too, which he has done in some of the national championships games and the academy games. He had that best on ground game in the first academy game against VFL players. So he's really ready to go. And I think there's a possibility at 194 centimetres that Trainer could actually go into the midfield, even play as a hybrid, tall utility on a wing, half forward, something like that. So he's a really versatile player. Another element to that for St Kilda is the fact that they might, because of the depth of this draft, with their second pick, they might be able to climb up the board, do a trade with the Gold Coast or Freo and actually get up the board and take a really good midfielder as well as Trainer. It will be interesting to see, again, if a Finn O'Sullivan, if a Jagger Smith or a Draper does fall down the board, if one of West Coast or Adelaide takes a punt on Trainer, I think then St Kilda get pushed into one of those high-end talent midfielders. But if the other, the top line midfielders go, I think Trainer is their man. Pick 8 is with the Hawks, and my first thought with them was that they needed more outside polish to go with their real strong contest winners. Players like Newcomb, Nash, Dylan Moore, forward of the ball, Nick Watson, they've gone with that sort of small forward contest winning type players, and they don't have a lot of the sort of really silky smooth midfielder type, so I thought about a Christian Moraes, but I think what they might do here is go for the super talented tall utility here in Matt Whitlock at 200 centimetres. He's one of the Whitlock twins, and he's coming really, really hard in this year's draft. He had a slow start to the season playing as a key defender. Since round 6 in the Coates League, when he went to the forward line, he's managed 15 goals, 9 in those 5 games. So in that time, he's been the most prolific tall forward in the competition. He's had games with 7 and 8 marks. He can take contested marks, but he also just uses his running power to get into space and take uncontested marks as well. He really becomes that extra midfielder. Hawthorn, they're always trying to do, particularly under Sam Mitchell, they're trying to do innovative things, and I just think they could use Matt Whitlock as this sort of hybrid player that goes from the back half to the forward half. Not quite a full-on ruckman with Matt Whitlock, but sort of imagine a Tim English, but with a little bit more ground-level dexterity, sort of playing through the arcs, being that extra, and just giving them a marking target outlet from D50 and then being able to push forward. And then they've got all those small forwards to just whip everything up at ground level. Part of my thinking here is the talent level of Whitlock, but it's also just the fact that I think Hawthorn, not that they lack any particular tall position player in a specific position, but they kind of do lack quality with their taller players. They've got talented players like James Sicily, but he's not really a full-on key defender height. He's sort of in that high 180s mark. None of their tall forwards are really absolute A grade level, so Whitlock could be a player that has that trajectory. So I really like this one. I think he's probably the most talented tall player in the draft. The only issue for Matt Whitlock is that he doesn't perhaps have a defined position at this stage, which is kind of holding him back, but he's one of the big movers. 200 centimetre athletic freak. I love it. So I think he'll go to Hawthorn with pick 8. Pick 9 is currently with the Gold Coast, but I'm going to do a bit of a switcheroo here. I'm going to say Richmond trade for this pick. Gold Coast are going to have to try to get up the board next year to get the picks for Zeke Euland, who'll be really high in the draft. So they're going to need points for next year. They could swap this pick with a team like Richmond. I mean, it really could be anyone, but I'm saying Richmond here. And I think Richmond could swoop in on one of the best midfielders in this draft that has again had an injury-interrupted season, and that's held him back a little bit. He's the perfect Dustin Martin replacement, and it's Sam Laylor at 187 centimetres. He's really Dustin Martin with more aerial ability, this guy. That's probably a big call. He's obviously not as good as Dustin Martin in the forward 50 at this stage, but he does have amazing hands when he comes out and gets the ball across the forward 50 line. He's Petrarca-like. He's inside-outside. He's only played 1 Coates Talent League game this season, and he had 34 touches first up. I loved his performance in the academy games against the Footscray VFL side. He was wonderful from clearance. He has that really strong body, the low centre of gravity. He's got that stoppage explosion that we talked about before. His kicking's pretty good. I'd say he's more of a metres gain player from the clearance rather than a beautiful kick hit-up player. But he can also push forward and win you a contest as well. He's got that real, like I said, Petrarca sort of X factor where you can go inside forward 50 and he'll just beat his opponent and kick the goal. So I've got him here at pick 9 to Richmond. I could even see Laylaw as the season progresses with more national championships games that he gets up the board even further. Melbourne will round out the pick 10, and I smell a bolter with this one. I've absolutely loved Beau Allen's national championship so far. He's averaged 19 touches and 5.5 tackles, but more importantly, I love the athleticism that he shows and the positional flexibility. In the last game against Vic Metro, he had 5 clearances from the midfield, 10 score involvement. So that kind of just shows the damage that this guy possesses. But just from the eye test as well, just the athleticism that he shows. He runs, he jumps at the ball. He's a bit of a wrecking ball, but he just has a little bit of decadence as well. It's not all just bash and crash. He has the skill to go with it. Sort of does little kicks where he's got the ball with one hand and he can kick around the corner and that sort of thing. He's a big-bodied mid, so he's 190 centimetres too. So a player that you can throw forward, you can throw into defence. He comes into the midfield. I get Bont vibes without being as maybe skilled with his kicking skills at this stage, but I smell a bolter in this one. I think if Melbourne... we'll have to talk about Melbourne actually quickly here too, because they're a team that's really changed their game style massively in the last 12 months. They went from that sort of contest clearance side to more of a transition football team, really. They tried to get Christian Salem into the midfield. They recruited Jack Billings, so they wanted to get the ball in his hands for kicking inside 50, but none of that's really worked, and it just feels like Melbourne have lost their identity a bit this year. So I think a really good contested big body player like Beau Allen sort of goes back to their roots a little bit with Melbourne and, could get their winning ways going again. So I like this pick, and Beau Allen I think is a big bolter in the back half of the year. So that rounds out the top 10, but the draft only really starts to get interesting from here. And this will be Freo's pick, who arguably have the best hand in this year's draft. They have 3 picks inside the top 20 as it stands. They may try to trade one of those picks, particularly if they're chasing Chad Warner next year and they're going to have to get up the board. But it's really hard to predict those things, so I'm just going to have Freo take the 3 picks at this stage. I think with pick 11, they might be able to get a little bit of a slider here in Christian Moray. He started the season hot. He was one of the top prospects coming into the season from 2023. He had a good bottom age year with the Eastern Rangers. He's in the Australian Academy side as well, so he's kind of got that pedigree there. As I said, started the season hot for the Eastern Rangers, where he kicked 9 goals in 3 games while averaging 25 touches. So he's that forward of centre midfielder. A little bit more suited to the outside, I would say. He's played for Vic Metro even this season as a halfback. As it's been difficult to get into that inside mid spot with Smiley, Ashcroft, and Jagger Smith in there. So played more of a halfback role, which kind of shows his outside game. He's good at setting up play. He's got those kicking skills, and he makes good decisions. His ability to hit the scoreboard, I think, for Freo will be really what they need. They've got Sarong, they've got Brayshaw, they've got Hayden Young. None of those players really get on the scoreboard a lot. I think they've tried to deploy Hayden Young as the most advanced of those midfielders. But if they can draft Moray and play him from an early stage, inside forward 50, I think he helps out those small forwards. They've got Swakowski down there. They've got Jaeger O'Meara sort of playing forward. He's not really a forward. Doesn't have a lot of pace, does O'Meara at this stage of his career. So I think Christian Moray would just give them a little bit of buzz inside 50, and from a longer term point of view, able to play through the midfield. Also able to play at half-back. So I think for a talent to pick point of view here, this one just makes sense for Freo if they're going to use this pick. Pick 12 is with Geelong, and I mulled over this one because I think maybe that they'll go for a key position player, but what they might do here is take the current injured player, which is Taj Hton, who is a potential top 10 pick, but he's probably going to slide a little bit due to the fact that he did his knee earlier in the season playing school footy, so he only got the 3 Coates Talent League games under his belt. He played an academy game as well, so he was everywhere in the first half of this season before doing the knee. He's 183 centimetres. He's really electric with his movement, with his speed, his ability to get out into space, take uncontested marks, but he's also inside forward 50, been a player that you've been able to put the ball in his head and he's able to mark it. He jumps at the ball. He's got really good vertical leap. I think he tested in the top 5 in one of those areas. So from his 3 Coates Talent League games at the early part of the season, he kicked 5 goals while averaging 29 touches. So it was really exciting stuff. And I think Geelong, they need high-end midfielders. They've got, Dangerfield, who's ageing. They've got Bowes, Bruin. Holmes is probably the most talented of those sort of new age mids, but they need a bit more class in there. And Again, Hton's someone that you could probably come in, play, give him a little bit of centre bounce time before pushing forward. You know that he's going to hit the scoreboard and he's going to do some nice things and he's going to be a bit exciting, which I think that older Geelong team really needs. I think the next pick here at 13 is where a bid will come for Ben Camporeale, who is a 186 centimetre midfielder. He's tied to Carlton with the father-son, so I think Carlton will match the bid here at pick 13. Again, it's not really a player that Carlton need, but he's just a player on talent that sort of, fits inside the top 20. He's a high accumulating midfielder, not one that hugely hurts you, but again, he's got a good athletic profile. He's got speed, he's got power, he's got pace, he runs all day, so the endurance factor is there as well. He can break tackles and he can get you a lot of metres gained. He always has plus 500 metres gained, all the national championships games, so really good from a ball moving perspective. I don't think his kicking is elite, and I think that's the area that would make him that really top echelon player. But I think a good pick for Carlton and someone that they can sort of develop for a couple of years before he has to play any serious footy. Pick 14 then falls with the GWS Giants, and they're a really hard one to pin down. They don't seem to want for a lot, I would say. They've got really good key defenders there with Taylor and Buckley and Hton and those sorts of players. Their tall forwards look pretty balanced as well. So it's probably going to be a small, and they might just get a project midfielder here. One that was really touted at the back end of last year is Tom Gross. Again, he's had injury interruptions and just hasn't been able to put those really big games together. I've likened him to a bit of a Riley Sanders come George Wardlaw, somewhere in there. He's not a huge disposal guy. He gets about 25 touches a game, but he has been able to hit the scoreboard, and he's a real sort of tough, uncompromising mid. So I think for the GWS Giants, they can get him in to kind of fill that Callum Ward hole that's going to be there in the future. He's 180 centimetres, and I think at pick 14, he's just a bit of a good get without being... He's not on that Finn O'Sullivan, sort of Jagger Smith level at this stage. Even, I think Sam Laylaw is probably ahead of him, played less footy, but... I think just for, again, talent for pick ratio, I think this one works for the Giants. And they get a really good player there at pick 14 that they may not have got if he had played the whole season without any injury interruptions. And pick 15 then is with Freo, who get their second pick in the top 20. Now, due to the fact that they have 3 picks, you've got to think about how they're going to do this from a list build perspective. And I think here they might take the talented key defender in Harry O Farrell. Now, they've got a pretty good back 6, but they could definitely use some understudies to some of those players. I don't think positionally, right now, they want for anything, so they don't need a player. They can get a project player like O Farrell in, and he kind of balances out what they're doing elsewhere. He's the best lockdown defender in the draft. Just to contrast him with Trainer a little bit, he averages 12 disposals and 4 marks, whereas Trainer's up around the, plus 20 disposals and takes a lot more intercept marks and gives you a lot more offensively. But Harry O'Farrell seems to always be able to shut down the opposition's best. He played a good role on one of the Whitlock twins earlier in the season, held him to no goals. Played on, I think it was Nichols for South Australia in the first National Championships game, and he didn't get much of it either. He's 195 centimetres, so a pretty good size. And yeah, for Freo, I think this just balances out the fact that they take a forward of centre mid, they take a key position player, and then with their next pick, which I'll just go into now, which will be pick 16, I think they'll take another small forward to help out Switkowski. They obviously lost Lockie Schultz. His name escaped me there for a second. They lost Lockie Schultz, so they are a small forward down. One of those real sort of nuggety, powerful type small forwards that really gets on the scoreboard, and that is Joe Berry. He's averaging 2.8 goals for the Murray Bushrangers. He's a big tackler, so he creates that pressure when Freo get the ball forward, and they're such a good clearance team that he really accompanies that well, being able to trap that ball inside forward 50. He's a bit of a bigger small forward than your average, like your Nick Watson or someone like that. I think sometimes you can get caught up trying to go for the A-grade midfielder in the draft, and I think Berry sitting there, he really accompanies what Freo want to do. The fact that they can get, say, a Moray with their first pick and then a key defender with their second, then Berry rounds that out perfectly. And I think forward of centre is the area that they really need to work on Freo. So Berry makes perfect sense at pick 16. Pick 17 then falls with Essendon, and I think this one works really well from a relationship point of view and for what Essendon need right now. So I think they'll take Isaac Kaku, who is an NGA product for them. They can't match a bid on him inside the top 20. That would have to be outside the top 40, which I don't really get, to be honest. But anyway, that's another conversation. Kaku is probably the best or the second best small forward in this draft. It's him and Berry, really. He's 178 centimetres. He's huge for scoreboard impact this season, playing for the Calder Cannons. He's kicked 15 goals, 23, so hasn't been super accurate, but he was in the previous season, so I don't think it's a bad kick thing. He may have lost confidence in the middle of the season, but just to be able to generate that much scoring is great in itself. He's huge for tackles as well. He puts a lot of pressure on inside forward 50. Essendon ranked 3rd for entries inside 50 this season. So I think being able to plonk Kaku down there, I think he's going to be able to play straight away. They don't have a lot of talented small forwards. They've got role players like Guelphy, so this makes sense. And a team pushing for the finals, pushing for the top 4, I think Kaku's a guy that can come in and play straight away and could be one of those players who comes in and plays in a premiership winning team in his first couple of seasons. Pick 18, and I smell a bid coming for the talented Tyler Welsh. I think Adelaide will match that for the 190 centimetre, 3rd tall forward, I would sort of say. And yeah, Welsh is an interesting one. He doesn't, I wouldn't say he's a super athletic tall forward or anything. He's a bit of an old school sort of key forward, I guess you would say, but probably sits height-wise in that sort of 3rd tall at the moment. But he's just a really impactful player. Every touch he seems to get either turns into a score involvement or a score. He's kicked bags of 3 and 4 in the national championship, so he can do it at the highest level. I think he's played a bit of SANFL footy as well at the highest level, so or the second highest level, what you want to say. But yeah, he's a very talented player and just a really good footballer, this guy. He's super competitive, wins all his contests and just makes a difference, I think. So for Adelaide, again, when you get a father-son player like that, it's a bit of a no-brainer. So they'll take him at 18. Then we move on to Sydney, who I think, given their situation, being a team that's really pushing for a premiership at the moment, they're well stocked in the midfield. They don't really need any player to come in and make a difference at this stage. So I think that bodes well for them picking a project type player. So they may take the other twin here in Jack Whitlock. I think he's a bit of a steal here at pick 19, and again, a project player that you can just develop for the future. Brodie Grundy's getting on, so you might need a ruck forward in the future, and Jack Whitlock ticks that as the 200 centimetre sort of ruck forward hybrid. And then rounding out the pick 20, I think a bid here could come. Sydney actually have 2 picks in a row here, so I think a bid could come for Sam Marshall, who's a really talented outside wingman. I think Brisbane still get to match this here with an academy prospect, so he's tied to the Brisbane Academy, Sam Marshall. He's a really good, silky outside wingman. He's a player that gets a lot of his disposals through work rate. We saw it in the national championships where he had 20 disposals, I think it was, in the last quarter against South Australia. He works really hard. He can play on the inside as well, which we've seen. He's had multiple clearances in games, playing for the Sandringham Dragons and also playing for the Allies as well. He's been one of the best players. He, Zeke Ewland and Leo Lombard, probably the 3 best players for the Allies so far in the competition. So again, makes sense for Brisbane to match this bid, and he's around the top 20 to top 25 prospect, I would say. That rounds out the top 20 for my Phantom Draft, and this is where the bargain starts. So we'll go to pick 21, which, as I said, falls with Sydney again. And I think they could take here Jobe Shanahan. Now, that would be taking 2 key position players, but as I said, I think the teams that are pushing for flags and stuff like that now, they're more likely to take developmental players. And Jobe Shanahan has proven to be one of the best. I would call him an old school key forward, really. He takes a lot of contested marks. He hasn't kicked a lot of bags of goals this season compared to some of the other guys like a Thomas Sims or the Whitlock brothers. So probably hasn't shown himself, but he always seems to find a way to get involved in the game. We saw that in the national championships. Even games he didn't kick a goal, he had big score involvements and goal assist numbers. He reminds me a little bit of Tom Hawkins. He's that sort of big body, not super tall at 194 centimetres, but imposes himself on the contest. And I think this would be just again, at the pick of 20, he suits the talent to pick ratio, I guess, at pick 21. Pick 22, it's with the Gold Coast, and I'm sure they're going to move some of these picks on to try to get points for next year, but I've got them here taking probably the second best lockdown key defender after Harry O Farrell, and that is Noah Miraz from the Dandenong Stingrays. He's 197 centimetres, and he's another one that's just been able to lock down at different stages this year, played the academy games in the VFL, and held himself really well. He's able to, he does get a little bit offensive too. He's maybe more of a hybrid between O'Farrell and Trainer. Got a big future though, Noah Miraz, good size, and at Pick 22, I think he is a good one, a good project player for the Gold Coast to put in behind, Sam Collins and those types of players. At pick 23, I think North Melbourne, with their second pick here, they're going to look to get that key position player. I mentioned Teakle and how he's been such a good focal point for them around Larkey. He's freed up the third tools. North are going to look for a project type player for the long term in that position. And I think the one that makes sense here is Thomas Sims. He's had some huge games this season, especially even just off the weekend's game for Vic Metro, where he kicked 3 goals, 3 against WA. He's a 200 centimetre athletic key forward. He's got super agility. He tested pre-season in the top 5 for agility at 200 centimetres, which is crazy. He can have some big games. He takes some big athletic type pack marks as well. So still needs a bit of development time, I think, does Thomas Sims, but he's definitely one that I think North Melbourne will have their eyes on here with this second round pick at 23. And then at 24, it'll be Richmond again. So they can really clean up in this draft, particularly if they get that second pick inside the top 10 that I maybe suspect that they will. So I think here at 24, they might go for Toby Travalia, a 188 centimetre rebounding halfback, I guess you would call him. I think if he grows a little bit bigger, he's almost at that key defender type height. I get a bit of Luke Hodge sort of vibes about this guy. He averages 25 disposals, so he's quite prolific. He does a lot of intercepting, both at ground level and in the air, so he's able to clunk a mark. And he's got that... We've seen it a lot with halfbacks going into the midfield in recent times. Hayden Young, Ed Richards, Jordan Dawson, those sorts of moves. And I think that makes sense for Toby Travalia. I'd like to see him deployed in a midfield role at some stage in the National Championships for Vic Country. I think that makes sense. He's got a really good athletic profile to go with good football smarts, good leadership, ticks all the boxes. So pick 24, I think that's about the range for Toby Travalia. I could see, again, if I saw him go into the midfield, I could imagine him bolting up the ladder a little bit more. Pick 25, it's to West Coast. I said that they needed some more ball use to go with their sort of brutish midfield. I think they'll look for some more smooth-moving halfbacks, guys that can kick the footy. They've got Brady Hoff down there. They've got Liam Duggan. Liam Duggan's ageing a bit, and Hoff's not, I'd say, the best ball user. So I think they'll go for Harrison Oliver here, who is the Vic Metro halfback. He's their main distributor from halfback, so he's got that talent level. He's trusted with ball in hand for both Sandringham and Vic Metro. 181 centimetres. He does some pretty good defensive stuff too, particularly for Vic Metro. You've seen him get his hands dirty. He likes to tackle. He likes to intercept the ball. Not really aerially, but especially at ground level. And then he just goes. So he works his opponent into the ground. He gets plenty of touches, averages over 25 in the Coates Talent League, and that beautiful left foot kick that just sets up play. Moving on to pick 26, and I think this is where Zach Johnson will come into things. He missed the first National Championships game for Vic Metro, played the second one, did a pretty good job. He's very prolific at Coates Talent League level, plays off halfback for the Northern Knights as well as through the midfield. He can do it on the inside, but I sort of like him just being that conductor type player. 28 touches a game for the Northern Knights, and he's just got so much leadership, runs for his teammates, and he often has to have a forward defensive player play on him just to stop his run and stop him setting up play from halfback. 185 centimetres too, so a really good size and just a great footballer. Freo have picked 27, and I've got them taking Luke Urquhart, who's had a really good national championship so far. Another just good clearance type midfielder, got good poise, seems to be able to get wrapped up in a tackle and just release that sort of last-ditch handball and always finds a teammate. So he's got good poise, good decision-making. No particular athletic traits like speed or athleticism in the air or anything like that, but just a good midfielder. And it sort of makes sense that I think if Freo had another pick here inside the top 30, that they would take a project midfielder in Luke Urquhart. Not a big disposal getter, but just a good player. Collingwood with the next pick, and they'll be looking for that steel side bottom replacement. I think Collingwood tend to like drafting more cerebral midfielders than they do those powerful midfielders, I would say. So, Murphy Reid ticks all the boxes. He's been compared to steel side bottom. Again, makes good decision, good ball use, sets up play, whether it's at half back or whether it's in the midfield. Kind of does it all. And again, 180 centimetres, just a good pick here for Collingwood at 28. So we've got 2 more picks to go. Gold Coast and the Western Bulldogs. I think Gold Coast, if they take this pick, they might go for Xavier Lindsay. I think he's the best available at this point. Another sort of more suited to the outside, but can play an inside midfield role. He's played for Gippsland on the inside and had 35 touches. He's played on the outside and he's more likely to get 25 and a couple of goals. Really good kick of the footy, inside 50. Played half back for the academy, I think, earlier in the year and set up play really well. So, yeah, it's another left footer with good ball use, probably similar to Harrison Oliver. And I think they'll go in that similar range in the 20s. Pick 30, so to round out my Phantom draft here for the top 30, I know this has gone on a very long time, but bear with me here, and I think pick 30 could be Cody Anderson. Now, he didn't get a spot in the Vic Metro team. I think the midfield depth is too strong there, but at times in the Coates League this season, Cody Anderson has looked like a B-grade Harley Reid, really. He's 181 centimetres. He's very, very powerful. He's stiff-arming people all over the place, breaking tackles and getting the ball forward. Now, he's not that good on the eyes from a kicking point of view. He's not hitting little darts inside 50 or anything like that, but he does fit the modern prototype of a player that can take territory. He's not really dissimilar from a ball use point of view to say like someone like a Ben Camporeale. He's not beautiful with the ball, but he gets it forward, he gets you territory, and then if you've got small forwards that can lock it inside forward 50, then Anderson's done his job because he's going to win his clearances, he's going to break tackles and get you forward. Western Bulldogs have pick 30, so I can see this coming. And what Cody Anderson also gives you is defensive pressure. He hurts you when he tackles you, and you can see players in the Coates League, they get nervous when he's around and they have the ball and they want to get rid of it. Creates so many turnovers with his tackles, and he also hits the scoreboard when he goes inside forward 50. So as much as from a talent level point of view, I don't think Cody Anderson is a top 20 or maybe even a top 30 pick, but I think the powerful attributes that he has pushes him up the draft board. Could even see someone taking a risk on him inside the top 20. And that is my top 30 Phantom draft players. So you're probably wondering who's not there, given I've just named the top 30. Well, there is still plenty of talented players in the next 20 bunch of players. Players that missed out on my top 30, Damon Hollow, Josh Murphy, Luca Grego, Josh Dolan, Jaden Newen, Jesse DeToli, Blake Kelly from WA, Malachi Champion, Patrick Rechko, Harvey Langford, Cooper Hines, Archie Day Wicks, Mackenzie, Salzberger, Lucas Camporeale, Xavier Ivasic, Phoenix Hargrave, Taj Stanley, James Barrett, and Jack Girardi, who are all fantastic players. So try fitting everyone in to the, 50 to 60 players that are going to end up getting drafted. It's going to be crazy. So that is a wrap for my Phantom draft for June. I'm definitely going to do another one of these closer to the draft when we have a little bit more information and we've had more national championships game. I am sorry that video went for so long, but I had to be pretty thorough with that and it took a long time. I meant to get this out last week and that's how much research I had to do on this. Anyway, that is a wrap for this one. I'll let you guys go and I'll see you next time.